What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019. And, well, spring should be here. It is in much of the country, not in all. We've got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. And I apologize for being absent yesterday. I'm a little bit under the weather. I got some kind of a bug here. I'm still dealing with it today, but I'm going to try and get through the show. So just bear with us, and we'll try and get through things today. What can I tell you? Alrighty, getting into the story here. Obviously, the big news these days is how the corporate media and the Democrats absolutely cratered in this Russia collusion hoax. They have absolutely failed, and it's an object lesson for the American people not to be listening to the corporate media, not to be listening to the Democrats. And the lesson there is you should never, ever, ever trust them again about anything, about vaccine safety, about whether GMOs are good for you, about whether humans are warming the planet. That's the lesson right there. And we should be paying attention to that. So it was an attempted coup d'etat against the elected president of the United States. And again, I'm not a big fan of Trump right now. I think he's a terrible disappointment. But he is the elected president. And in a nation that is supposed to be governed by the rule of law, he's going to be the president for about another, well, a little less than 2 years. And we shouldn't be mucking about with that. And those that tried this coup d'etat, they are effectively criminals. We should be treating them as criminals. But the big issue, of course, is the corporate media that pushed this story of Trump-Russia collusion just constantly, 24/7, day after day after day after day. And it was a lie. It was a complete lie. And just keep that in mind the next time the corporate media tells you that this product is good or that product is bad or this is what you should be thinking or why we have to go to war in this other country. Just keep that in mind. The corporate media lies to you, whether it's Trump-Russia collusion or Saddam's nuclear weapons or Assad's sarin gas or any of that stuff. That's what the corporate media does. It lies to you to control you, to get you to go along with various agendas. That's the lesson. Here endeth the lesson here. Okay, the Pentagon has decided they're going to halt F-35 fighter jet deliveries to Turkey until Turkey cancels their order of the Russian S-400 systems. And apparently, the United States is saying that the Russian S-400 system would compromise the security of the F-35 aircraft. Now, that may be an admission. There is a defect in the F-35, which makes it vulnerable to the S-400, or it may just be more arm twisting to try and get other countries to buy American products when they want to buy better products from other countries, which we've been talking about for a very, very long time here. So we'll see what's going to happen there here. Over in Yemen, Al Jazeera has obtained footage that proves child soldiers are in the recruitment camps of the Saudi UAE-led coalition fighting in Yemen. And these are desperately poor children being recruited to fight along the Saudi border. to defend it from the Houthis, a rebel group which has overran the capital. Now, the Houthis are not really rebels. The Houthis are the government that was displaced by the United States years ago. And they basically want their country back. So back in 2015, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates formed a coalition to overthrow the Houthis. They're acting as U.S. proxies, plunging Yemen into a ruinous war. And they keep talking about the country's internationally recognized government. Well, other nations don't have the right to recognize a government. It's whatever government the people of a nation vote into power, which is what Yemen had to begin with. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And I'm, back on the air today. I'm a little bit under the weather, but we're going to try and get through the show today here. The United States has conducted airstrikes against southern Yemen. At least 6 airstrikes were carried out by U.S. forces over the past week in Yemen. The strikes were intended to target the local al-Qaeda affiliate in al-Baida province. Now, as usual, CENTCOM offered no casualty data or any details of who was hit or even who was the intended target. It's just, we bombed Yemen, you should be glad about that, and applaud and clap your hands and say, ooh, it's good, war's fun, isn't this wonderful? There is a new spin that's floating around regarding Syria, and it has to do with the claim that the reason Syria is not contesting Donald Trump's proclamation granting Israel sovereignty over the Golan Heights is that Bashar al-Assad has sort of tacitly agreed to this in exchange for the United States not removing him from power. Now, I'm not sure how much credibility to give this. He's basically won the war. But that's the latest spin that's coming on around. All right. Over in Ukraine, it looks like Poroshenko's income, at least according to his tax records, his income jumped 10,000%. Somebody is pouring in huge amounts of money to Poroshenko's income. And much of it came from a return on investment in the Zurich-based Rothschild Trust Schweiz, a trust subsidiary of Rothschild Bank AG. So it looks like he's just getting paid huge amounts of money to be the president of Ukraine and basically make sure that it merges with Europe here. Okay, let's talk about Joe Biden. He's in the news an awful lot, and we have to be very, very careful here. Joe Biden does have a reputation for being very touchy-feely with a lot of people, including, unfortunately, young children. It does look bad. He's on video doing a lot of it. But I have to wonder how much of this is real news reporting and how much of this is politically motivated to try and get him out of the Democratic race as quickly as possible. In which case I would say that this may be Hillary Clinton after him. But there's a second woman has come forth saying that Joe Biden touched her inappropriately, rubbed noses with her at a 2000 political fundraiser. I mean, come on, rubbing noses. When did that become sexual assault? I mean, it really is getting a little bit silly. Now, a lot of people said Biden's approach to people is a little creepy, and yes, it is. But this feels like it's being fanned up for political reasons. not because he's a bad guy. And it feels like the kind of dirty politics, the politics of personal destruction that we see coming from the Clinton campaign. Now, apparently, Biden is now out there bragging about the time when he was vice president that he strong-armed Ukraine into firing its top prosecutor. Biden described how he threatened Ukrainian President Poroshenko in March of 2016 that the Obama administration would pull $1 billion in loan guarantees, sending Ukraine into insolvency if it didn't immediately fire Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin. Biden said, "You're not getting the billion. I'm going to be leaving here in, I think, about 6 hours. I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor is not fired, you are not getting the money." I'm not so sure about that. Meanwhile, over at The View, and I don't know why people even watch The View anymore, but apparently the women of The View, don't think much of the accusations made against Joe Biden about inappropriate behavior with women, and several said they wanted him to continue smelling women's hair and kissing them without asking. And again, I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden, but it does seem like a lot of his attentions are just simple affection. And it seems like it's become the fashion here in the United States where being kissed or having your hair smelled or rubbing noses or simple touching is all of a sudden mapped into sexual assault. And the reason I know it's a matter of fashion, back in the 1990s, I was working in Germany. And here in the United States of America, the feminists were already up on, rape this and rape that, and men can't do this and men can't do that. And it was completely the opposite in Europe. And it was like women expected you to flirt with them. They expected attention. And if they didn't get it, they would get back at you. Paperwork would be lost. Things wouldn't work out for you. They wanted flirting and attention. They wanted to be, not groped, but definitely touched. And these things are a matter of fashion here. Meanwhile, Alyssa Milano, who was normally out there screaming about the Me Too movement, is out there saying that the country needs Joe Biden's kind, empathetic leadership, and that Biden didn't have any bad intentions with his actions. Now, I've looked at the videos of Joe Biden, and some of it does look creepy, especially with kids. But it's hard to say that it's actually of evil intent. For one thing, if it was evil in intent, he wouldn't be doing it in front of a camera. And I'm kind of affectionate with small children myself, not to the same extent. I like touch noses and make silly faces. And I don't know. It just feels like it's a dirty politics campaign. All right. Apparently, NBC and MSNBC has hired John Brennan, former head of the CIA, as a news analyst. Now, this is the guy who was running the CIA when the Trump-Russia investigation began. He was a key player in the news who was shaping as a paid colleague of their reporters. It is a huge ethical breach. It is another reason why you should not trust anything coming out of NBC and MSNBC. They're still playing the game the way they played it before. They have not learned a lesson from their recent embarrassment. They're still going on and doing what they're going to do here. Now, a lot of people have been talking about changing the voter demographics, and the way they're changing it One way, of course, is illegal immigrants who are pouring across the border by the millions. And the other is by recently released felons who are being given back their right to vote. That one appears to be backfiring because felons being released from jail in Florida are registering to vote as Republicans. There's a little bit of an oopsie for the Democrats there. They're registering as Republicans. Now, somebody once called into our show here and said, you know, these illegal immigrants pouring across the border are very religious. And because the Democrats are not religious, they're anti-religion, they're pro-abortion, that you might actually see the illegal immigrants vote Republican rather than Democrat. And wouldn't that be a tremendous blow to the Democratic Party here? All right, over in the United Arab Emirates, apparently a group of American hackers who once worked for U.S. intelligence agencies helped the United Arab Emirates spy on a BBC host, the chairman of Al Jazeera, and other prominent Arab media figures during a tense 2017 confrontation pitting the UAE and its allies against Qatar. Apparently, the American operatives worked for Project Raven, a secret Emirati intelligence program that spied on dissidents, fighters, and political opponents of the UAE monarchy. Reuters' investigation in January revealed Project Raven's existence and inner workings, including the fact it surveilled a British activist and several unnamed U.S. journalists. Everybody's spying on everybody out there. Okay. As you know, there's been a tremendous concern over the weaponization of space. In particular, the possibility that blowing up other people's satellites could create a cascade effect that could literally trap humans on planet Earth for decades to come, unable to launch into space because of all the shrapnel flying around. Well, apparently, Russia's foreign ministry is now slamming Washington, D.C. for sabotaging talks on the potential for space disarmament. And Washington has blocked the final report on the prevention of an arms race in space without any reasonable explanation, the Russian Foreign Ministry said, as a UN group on governmental experts failed to come up with a joint document. They were really trying to prevent this from happening, and I think it would be a good idea if they did. Experts from 25 states held talks in Geneva at the end of March. Established by the UN General Assembly in 2017, the group of governmental experts was set to lay the basis for a treaty that would ensure peace in space. Unfortunately, little progress has been made, and mostly that's because of the United States of America. And again, the problem here is that if you blow up an airplane flying over a battlefield, it crashes to the ground, and that's the end of it. If you blow up a satellite in orbit, all the pieces go into other orbits and present a risk to other satellites. In fact, there's a lot of concern over India's recent anti-satellite weapon test, where they blew up one of their own satellites, and there are now at least 250 trackable components now in different orbits representing a threat to other satellites, including the ISS. So a lot of people are very, very concerned about that. All right, we're going to take a break here for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, welcome back to our show here. And over in Portland, Oregon, interesting little story. This is coming out of Blacklisted News, talking about a wave of hate crime hoaxes happening in Portland, Oregon. And if there's anything good that came out of the Jussie Smollett case, it is basically the awareness that a lot of hate crime hoaxes are are in fact, there are a lot of hoaxes out there. And I think that's a good thing for people to be aware of. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Jim in Chicago. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I think you are 100% correct when it comes to Joe Biden. What happened with this young lady, I think someone put her up to that or even paid her to get Joe Biden out of the picture. I know about a half an hour ago I was listening to Nancy Pelosi, and she was very negative toward Joe Biden, telling her, she was saying that Joe Biden really needs to learn to be more of an adult than acting like a child. She was very critical of him. Now, do you remember back in 2016 when he was planning on running and someone shot a bullet in his home?
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, so I think Joe has been given a message, you're not going to be running. In fact, 10 days ago, he was planning on running. In fact, the speech that he gave, he almost slipped it out.
Yeah, but he still hasn't officially declared. But interestingly enough, he's at the top of the polls for the Democrats.
Right. And I think you might be right. Hillary, she's still waiting to run.
Yeah. I think she's going to step in.
Right. All right, Michael, you take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. Yeah, it does feel, like this sudden attention on Joe Biden's tendency to be touchy-feely. And I understand in this politically correct, Me Too, hyper-triggered world, it could be seen as a negative. But it does feel like it's a politics of personal destruction campaign to try and get him out of the race as quickly as possible. And I think we're going to see the leading Democrats picked off one by one so that Hillary can step in to the 2020 race. And I think that's what's going on here. Okay, now as you know, we have seen a really hard winter. It's still snowing in some parts of this country, and this is April. And of course, with all that snow, it's triggered all kinds of major flooding, which our government, had it been doing its job properly, would have realized was going to be a problem and made sure that flood control was intact, that the levees were reinforced. They didn't do that. And as a result, we've got a major, major problem in that a lot of our food-producing states are now flooded. And the silos have been ruptured. They've been collapsed. And a lot of these fields are not going to be plantable for another month, month and a half at least. 1 million calves drowned. There are going to be major, major food shortages in this country. So by all means, let's bring, 1 million more Democratic voting hungry mouths across that southern border. So there are going to be food shortages here, and U.S. disaster aid will not cover the crops drowned by the Midwest floods. So it's a major problem. Nobody wants to talk about it, but there are going to be food shortages and high food prices this year. There could even be food riots when all those illegal immigrants who were promised all kinds of free stuff and they're not getting it, and they're going to go into the supermarkets and they're going to be fighting for the same food that you are. All right. It is an issue. It is a very urgent issue, and nobody wants to talk about it. But there are going to be food shortages in this country. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break. And we've got a caller waiting on the line after we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones now to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm really sorry you're feeling so bad. I'm going to tell you right now, you're a warrior still doing your show today. I appreciate it. I'm sure all your viewers appreciate it. Thank you.
I noticed last Sunday at Claire's church, everybody there was coughing and wheezing and hacking, and I guess I picked up a bug from them, and I'm just trying to get through the show today, and hopefully I'll be back to my normal, obnoxious, annoying self tomorrow.
I don't think you're obnoxious, Mike, but I'm sure your critics do. So this flooding and whatnot, what's going on in the United States floodplains, it's going to be blamed on climate change, of course, right?
Oh, they're already doing that, yeah. Oh, it's climate change, it's climate disruption, you got to pay carbon taxes or this will happen again. And like I said before, the reason it's happening is because we have a government that looked at all the heavy snowpack built up over the last winter and ignored it. Didn't pay attention to it. They were so intent on giving our tax money to Israel or funding these wars into the countries, they ignored our flood control infrastructure, and levees are failing all over the place, and we're going to pay the price for it.
Yeah, and in fact, not only did they ignore it, but I bet, I'm willing to bet, just like in the country I live in, that they actually cut the budget for snow removal and the whole winter thing.
Yes.
I guarantee it. Right?
Yep.
So the carbon tax is now official in Canada. It started yesterday on April Fool's Day because we are fools. And, here's something funny, Mike. Around, midday, whatnot, the government released a report that basically said that Canada is warming at twice the global rate. And we're talking about the Prime Minister who's a globalist.
Yes.
Isn't that amazing how that warming just stops right at the border?
Yeah, that's just absolutely amazing. You gosh darn Canadians, you're just wrecking the world for the rest of us.
If it weren't so, it just goes to show you, Mike, that these people are really, really stupid. They actually believe that we're going to believe this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like I can understand. You take it like a big city, any city, anywhere in the world. The overall temperature of that city is going to be higher than the suburbs, and of course, the green belts, because of all the concrete and steel.
Yeah, the urban heat island effect.
Yes, I can understand it, but to actually say the whole country, and we have that huge boreal forest, Mike.
Yeah.
It's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. But, so Canada gets a lot of food from the United States.
Yes.
As I'm sure you probably know in the wintertime, right?
Yep.
And, I think you're absolutely right. It's going to be a late spring for planting, if some farmers even plant, right?
Yep.
And it's going to be a bad harvest year. There's no two ways around it. So, yeah, people should start knuckling under, knowing that they're going to be paying more for food in the next few months. Well, in the next 3 or 4 months for sure.
I mean, the effects for this could actually last for more than a couple of years.
Yeah. Well, you remember before winter even hit, you were talking about the Farmer's Almanac, and they said we're going to have a hard winter.
Yep.
They weren't wrong.
Nope.
So, I'm a big fan of the Farmer's Almanac. It's been around so long. They're not really trying to fool anybody. They're not creating, their own, what would you call that, problem, reaction, solution thing. They're not creating their own, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Something to scare people. And so, I don't know. Mike, it's just, climate change. They never talk about that North Pole moving, though. Never. It's always carbon dioxide. We're carbon-based animals. We live in a carbon-based ecosystem. It is carbon. That's what we do.
Yeah, it is. Carbon is the core of all of our life here, and it is ridiculous for the EPA to declare carbon dioxide a toxic pollutant when, in fact, it is actually plant food.
Yeah, it's not toxic.
No.
Anyway, I appreciate your time, Mike. I hope you're feeling better. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go for that here. Now, as you know, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, just completed their annual summit in Washington. They're claiming that 18,000 supporters attended the event, which concluded with a day of lobbying Congress by all of the attendees to basically take more of your money and give it to Israel. And it's basically a sign that Jewish power is rolling over Washington, D.C. And it was rather interesting that one of the billboards that was put up in opposition to Representative Ilhan Omar came on out and said, you know, that Jews using their money to control the government is an anti-Semitic trope. And yet here we have this convention proving exactly the opposite. That yes, very wealthy American Jews like Sheldon Adelson do use their money to control the American political system for the benefit of Israel, and to your detriment, I might add here. Okay, new developments coming out of Judicial Watch. They are suing the Office of the Director of National Intelligence for details of a meeting with the FBI regarding national security threats associated with former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's private email system. And basically what they're saying is that Hillary Clinton put classified info on the internet equivalent of a public park bench, and foreign nations took advantage of it, including China and Russia. And apparently Clinton was protected from the fallout by Peter Strzok. So Judicial Watch has filed yet another lawsuit. They're out there they're doing the heavy lifting rather. And they filed the lawsuit after the Office of the Director of National Intelligence failed to respond to a July 13, 2018 Freedom of Information Act request. So they're having to sue yet again. Now, that's not the intent of the Freedom of Information Act. The Freedom of Information Act, the way it works is you request the information, the government gives it to you. But in this case, the government repeatedly refuses to do so, resulting in these endless lawsuits. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Mark on the West Coast, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just tuned in when you mentioned you have a bug.
Yeah.
I assume that's a virus, right?
Well, I'm not sure what it is exactly. It's just something I picked up.
Okay, something you picked up. I just want to mention to you that maybe you already know the best thing for that is to take vitamin C, gram doses, every hour.
I have time-released vitamin C that I'm taking along with nanosilver.
Okay, good. Don't be shy about the vitamin C.
Yes.
Take it until you get well.
All right.
That's my message to you today.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Already doing it.
Oh, okay, good.
All right. Thanks a lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Okay. Democratic Representative Ro Khanna is calling for a bipartisan coalition to work with Trump on ending the foreign wars. And Ro Khanna is a progressive Democrat who's the co-chairman of the 2020 Democrat presidential campaign for Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders, and basically told Breitbart News in an interview that he hopes a bipartisan coalition comes together to work with Trump to end a number of wars and U.S. military conflicts worldwide. Would certainly like to see that. Trump campaigned on that. But in point of fact, it seems like the wars are continuing, and in fact, we're aiming at more wars like the one in Venezuela. So Ro Khanna argued that if the United States stops its backing of Saudi Arabia in Yemen's civil war, finally ends the war in Afghanistan, withdraws troops from Syria, resists temptations to get into Venezuela, and completes peace negotiation with North Korea, then the United States could better invest resources wasted abroad into rebuilding America's infrastructure. It sounds really good. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's a really, really good idea because, again, those Midwest farmers, are feeling the effects of our neglected infrastructure. Okay, apparently leading Democratic senators are expected to introduce a constitutional amendment to abolish the Electoral College. Now, this is a long shot idea that's been gaining steam among 2020 presidential candidates so that future Democratic candidates will only have to campaign in places like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York City, and the rest of the country can just go pound sand. So Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii plans to introduce the measure along with Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, the number 2 ranking Democrat in the House, and Senator Dianne Feinstein of California, the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee. I actually briefly met Brian Schatz 3 Halloweens ago. Claire's laughing in the other room. We were doing Halloween. We had our little table out with the candies, and I had my Hillary for Prison t-shirt on. And so this family comes on up, and the kids are getting the candy, and this guy comes bounding up the walkway and says, "Hi, I'm Brian Schatz," and then he sees that the t-shirt says Hillary for Prison, and he like turns around and just runs back down the walkway. So that was the one time I met Brian Schatz. Okay. More is coming out about Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele, authors of the P dossier. Apparently, George Soros paid these firms tied to Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele more than $3.8 million in 2017 to provide, quote, research and analysis to government entities. And the payments were made by the Democracy Integrity Project, or more than 3 times what the DNC and Clinton campaign paid Fusion GPS and Steele during the presidential campaign. There's a lot of money out there if you're willing to lie for it. I should have learned how to lie. I could make a lot more money than I'm making now. Okay. There's been another discovery by NASA's Curiosity rover on Mars, and it's discovered that background levels of methane in Mars' atmosphere cycle seasonally, peaking in the northern summer, which is another indicator of life. And I wish NASA would quit equivocating, because we discovered indigenous life on Mars in the Viking missions back in 1976. But it's like NASA just, well, maybe there is and maybe there isn't, and they're playing politics because the Bible bangers don't want there to be life on Mars because it means that God doesn't sit up nights admiring us or something. And I mentioned this a little earlier in the show here. India has destroyed one of its own orbiting satellites in a recent missile test of an anti-satellite weapon, and it sent debris orbiting in all these kind of unpredictable orbits. NORAD is tracking 250 components of the destroyed satellite. And there, of course, are a lot smaller pieces out there. And in a crossing orbit, they can hit at thousands of miles per hour. And now it's been determined that some of these fragments might actually be a danger to the International Space Station. And they held a press conference in which Jim Bridenstine said that the anti-satellite test is not compatible with the future of human spaceflight. It's unacceptable, and NASA needs to be very clear about what its impact is to us. And they're absolutely right. The weaponization of space could literally imprison the human race on planet Earth for decades to come. Would also, of course, destroy communication satellites, weather satellites, MTV. We'd have to live without MTV. Okay, getting into the economic news here. The FCC has fined robocallers $208 million. Well, good for the FCC. The problem is they've only collected $6,790. And part of the problem is the robocallers are located offshore. Their call centers are located offshore. They're not affected by the do not call list. I get all kinds of robocalls all the time. In fact, half of the calls I get on my cell phone are from various robocallers. Oh, we can get you a better credit card rate. We can get you a new insurance policy. We can get you this. We can get you that. I wish there were a way to block them out. But apparently there isn't. And in part, it's because they spoof the phone numbers. So you can't just say, remember this phone number and block it. It's really annoying. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go to the phones now. Don in the Philippines, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yes, I live pretty close. I'm in the Philippines, but in the U.S., I live pretty close to the Missouri River there in Iowa, where the flooding is. My property is not affected.
Good.
As far as I know, but the people there, I talked to a couple of them, and they said they were telling me the way they handled the dams there is part of the problem. I'm thinking, well, man, that sounds like they're just griping about it. But no, I looked. There's an article here on U.S. News and World Report where they're talking about this. They changed somewhere along the line. They changed the priorities of the flood control, the way they release the water from the dams. And it used to be flood control was the #1 priority, but now it's at the bottom of the list. They're worried about some endangered species. And that's part of the problem. I don't know exactly when they released the water too early is what they were telling me. These people in Iowa were telling me, and one of the congressmen from Missouri was talking to them, and he said, "I was told point blank, flood control is not our top priority. It is not. Period." They were very firm on that point. Josh Hawley said, "I said, you've got to be kidding me." So they don't. They don't care about the floods that much. This is the problem right there.
Well, I think maybe after this year, there should be a reordering of the priorities. I mean, I understand the concern for endangered species, but humans must come first.
Yeah, they had a lawsuit. According to this, they had a lawsuit in 2011. 400 farmers sued the Army Corps of Engineers, and they won. But still, this did not result in any change in the practices. So, after this one, though, this is a pretty bad one. There's some of those towns are totally. I don't know if they'll ever come back. Hamburg, Iowa, and some of those towns, they're just flooded.
No,
I guess they will come back.
They're gone. They're absolutely gone.
Well, it's a bad thing. I mean, people have to be number one compared to this species, which is the some sturgeon. The pallid sturgeon, a seldom seen bottom-feeding fish they're worried about. So anyway, I'll let you go on this, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. And Dustin, I'm going to have to take you through the station break. What's on your mind today?
Oh, real quick on the flooding. 1 million calves dead, 1 million acres flooded, and a giant grain silo in Iowa's gone. That collapsed. So, yeah, it's pretty bad, and it's going to continue through May.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Okay, Dustin, stay on the line. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and we're going to go right back to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I wanted to jump real quick to creepy Uncle Joe Biden because, hey, Mike, remember there was that report where he liked to go skinny dipping nude in front of like a female Secret Service agent in the swimming pool. So something wrong with the dude somewhere. And you know, Mike, remember Boys Town in Washington?
Hold it.
Okay,
I mean,
okay.
I think most of us, if we're honest, will admit that we have gone skinny dipping at some point in our life. I got to go skinny dipping with the bunnies up at Hef's place years ago. And, you know, it was just a lot of fun. And it was not considered inappropriate at the time. You know, unfortunately, the Secret Service, you know, they're surrounding these individuals. And these individuals, you know, at some point are going to say, I'm just not going to change my life to make things comfortable for them.
Yeah, I don't know the guy. But, you know, with Boys Town in Washington, D.C. is full of murderers, crooks, liars, and creepos. And Mike, even if Joe Biden's not a creepo, I wouldn't ever vote for him because remember the coup in Ukraine and he set his son up?
Yes.
Charge of the so the guy's no good anyway.
Well,
he goes
on that, I would join you in saying I'm not going to vote for the guy, but you know, they're trying to make a big deal out of his smelling the hair of women and touching their shoulders and you know rubbing noses with them, and I'm sorry that's really I think they're making a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah, we just don't know. I mean, people can show videos all they want, but that's not the full story unless you really know the guy himself. It could just be, you know, he's very affectionate. You know, like we just don't know. But we do know though that he goes along with the murders and crooks and liars.
Yes.
Yeah, with Ukraine and other wars. Yeah. Hey, Mike, I wanted to jump. Do you ever hear of this group called Tier 1? It's like they're out of Arkansas. They like train like hit squads and tactics and all, and they're supposed to be the ones that supposedly train the 15-man hit squad that killed Khashoggi in the embassy in Turkey.
Yes.
That's the rumor, you know. So like, so there's a lot of these groups in the United States, these and around the world, you know, these mercenary groups that will be aligned with the CIA. I know there was one in Britain. I forgot the name out of Britain. But Mike, did you hear? There's another report that at a TASS. I don't know if you talked about this yet about how French and Belgium special forces were in Syria. Maybe they're going to do some kind of a chemical attack.
The Russian Foreign Ministry has been warning about that for some time now.
Yeah, because you know, like there's different players at work here. You know, like the U.S. is involved, and the British, and it seems like France is really involved because that used to be a French colony.
Yes.
You know, and they really want Assad out. So I don't know how much of I mean, this is not even about Macron, because this goes back to Sarkozy, I believe, right?
Yes.
I mean, you know, so this is bigger than Macron, you know, as far as his group is, because Sarkozy was a different group than Macron, even though they all are globalists, right? Sarkozy
Yes.
was a globalist, And then I got one more quick thing, that Russia is doing more tests on the Vesnik, that's that nuclear-powered cruise missile. It's actually
Yes.
called the SSCX-9 Skyfall. I don't know if that's the NATO name, but it's SSCX-9 Skyfall. I don't like that word Skyfall. a lot there, but yeah, that's the name of it.
Yeah, that sounds. I mean, there's some really nasty stuff out there, and again, it looks like some of these weapons actually use true fission reactors. I was reading a report on one of the U.S. equivalents, and they made it very clear it's an actual fission reactor that is used to heat the air in order to drive it forward. And that makes it very, very dangerous. Wherever it crashes, even if it's shot down, it's going to be a radioactive disaster.
Is this like a way more advanced version of the Project Pluto, right? Project Pluto was just like a floating doomsday weapon, right? Well, not a doomsday weapon per se, but that was a floating, it's like radioactive heap, right? Floating around, just spewing out radiation all over the place. That was back in the 50s, I believe, right?
Yeah, there was some
test-
stuff back in the 50s. There was Project Orion, which was the first attempt to create a nuclear-powered rocket, and it didn't work out very well. But again, it just spewed huge amounts of radiation out its rear end.
All right, Mike, have a good rest of the show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and the phone lines are open. So, getting on back to the economic news, apparently Sears, which is still trying to recover from its near bankruptcy, has basically canceled the life insurance for 90,000 retirees. And they just basically have sent out letters to the 90,000 retirees. They'll be losing their life insurance benefits as of, the middle of last month, as a matter of fact. So apparently some of these people didn't even receive the letters until after the 15th had passed. Okay, Russian banks are now joining the Chinese alternative to the SWIFT payment system. The de-dollarization of the world is continuing. The more the U.S. tries to weaponize the dollar, weaponize SWIFT, the more other countries are turning away. So several Russian banks have joined the China International Payment System to ease operations between the two countries and to basically prevent the imposition of sanctions. And with the dollar getting dumped by many countries around the world, we're looking at a major dislocation of the U.S. economy, which is already starting to manifest. We can see it with retail Mageddon. Okay. Russia's actively dumping U.S. dollars and buying gold at the fastest pace in decades. And the writing is on the wall when it comes to what the Kremlin thinks of any possibility for a detente in the painfully strained U.S.-Russian relations. I don't know where Trump is getting his advice, but he needs better advisors. Okay. Down on our southern border, the Border Control Commissioner has revealed that crisis levels of detention in El Paso, Texas, had led to hundreds of migrants being held under a bridge. And the politicians are stepping in, mostly to point fingers. Oh, it's your fault these people are being held underneath this bridge. No, 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 it's your fault. Actually, it's their fault. They made the choice to step across that border, which is a Title VIII violation. And I am really tired of all these open borders people saying we should feel sorry for these people and, oh my goodness, the children are suffering. Well, that's the fault of the parents who brought them across the border illegally. Okay? I don't have any sympathy for them. And right now, looking at a major food shortage coming up in this country because of the Midwestern flooding, it's dangerous to just keep those borders open. Trump needs to shut that border down. Either build a wall or put the military down there. But we can't have these hungry mouths coming into this country at a time when we're looking at major food shortages. That's just how it is. Now, Representative Ilhan Omar is calling the overcrowding at El Paso a reflection of white nationalism. And this is her meltdown over the photo of hundreds of migrants being held in the parking lot of a Border Patrol station in El Paso because there's simply not enough room indoors for the thousands of people. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "I cannot and will accept it." Okay, well, how many of those illegal immigrants are you going to take into your home there, Alexandria? Kamala Harris calls it a humanitarian crisis and a violation of human rights. Representative Ilhan Omar, not only was it aberrant and inhumane in her eyes, it was a reflection of white nationalism. I think that's a little bit over the top there, Omar. But again, whose fault is this? It's the fault of those who chose, of their own free will, to step across the U.S. border without official permission. That's what it means to be an illegal immigrant. You walk across the border, you are immediately a criminal. Now, Donald Trump is out there berating Democrats for causing a crisis at the southern border by promising amnesty for illegal immigrants and making sure they take advantage of legal protections. Basically, there are Democratic lawyers down there at the border helping the immigrants to basically exploit legal loopholes and apply for amnesty. And why are they doing this? Well, because the Democrats are assuming that the illegal immigrants will vote Democratic, as they have in the past. And let's set aside the fact that illegal immigrants aren't supposed to be voting in the first place. But Trump said it's a big fat con job, and he's absolutely right about that. The Democrats are going to use the illegal immigrants to steal the 2020 elections. Now, Tom Fitton over at Judicial Watch is saying civilian agencies are not enough to secure the border. Trump should deploy the military. And Trump should do something. Trump should do something, and he's not doing anything right now. For all the talk that we've heard, for all the nattering and gromishing that we've heard, nothing is yet being done. The problem is still going on. Now, according to Pew Research, the top priority for Republican voters is deporting the illegal aliens. That is their number one concern. 65% of GOP voters said the highest priority of the Republican Party should be ending illegal immigration and reducing the illegal alien population currently living in the United States. Take them on down to that border, get out the trebuchet, and just fling them across the border. Or get those pumpkin chunkin' people with their air cannons, get them down on the border, and just start firing those illegal immigrants across the border. Longest range and most bounces win the trophy. And I know I'm going to get a lot of calls and emails saying you're being a racist. I'm saying, no, I'm not being a racist. Illegal is not a race. We have to have America for Americans first. And right now we're facing a food crisis because of the Midwestern floods, which have resulted from government negligence of our flood control system and their refusal to recognize we had a very hard winter. No. We've got global warming. There's no snow out there. We've got global warming. Well, wrong. You had a lot of snow and you've got a lot of flood water, and now we're looking at a food crisis in this country. And hungry mouths streaming across the southern border is not going to make it any easier for us, even if they do vote Democratic. Okay. Over in Great Britain, Theresa May has suffered yet another humiliation as Parliament has voted down her latest EU exit agreement. Now, last Friday was supposed to be the day when Britain broke free from the Eurozone. It's now been extended to the 12th of this month. And already there are protests in the streets of London saying, look, it's time. We have to go. We want to go. We voted to go. And apparently the mood in Parliament is getting very testy, where one cabinet minister basically said that, blank knows I'm past caring. It's like the living dead in here. And this came from Nicholas Watt, the political editor of BBC's Newsnight Now, saying, in cabinet, I'm picking up complete and utter despair. I said to one cabinet minister, so why is the prime minister holding a vote when she's pretty sure she's going to lose? And the cabinet minister said, blank knows I'm past caring. It's like the living dead in here. Theresa May is the sole architect of this mess. It's her inability to engage in the most basic human interactions that brought us here. So Theresa May looks like she's hoisted on her own petard. It is probably not going to be long for the prime ministership of Great Britain. And again, people are already demonstrating in London. They're demonstrating on the delay. They want out from the European Union. They want it now. And if Parliament doesn't give the British people what the British people voted for, I think there's going to be a major, major upset in the streets of Great Britain here. In fact, we're even looking at the possibility of a new general election, because confidence in, first of all, Theresa May and in Parliament in general has just collapsed. So, anyway. Over at Google, employees are demanding a conservative AI ethics board member be fired for transphobia after she said you can't change the definition of women to include men. Now that makes perfect sense to me. Men are men, women are women. It's in the DNA. It's basically encoded into you during your gestation. But the Google employees are out there saying, oh, no. It's transphobic. Fire this person. Fire this person immediately. And I think this transphobia nonsense is just another way that the government is seeking to divide us against each other. To get us arguing over which restrooms we can use, to just literally create out of nothing a new area of concern or controversy to divide us again. Because that's how the government seeks to control us, keep us divided. Men against women, black against white, young against old, rich against poor, gay against straights, trans, whatever they are, against whatever the rest of us are, and so forth. We got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here, and as usual, Republic Broadcasting does need your help. There's no question about it. We don't have people like George Soros contributing to us, because if we did, we'd have to lie to you. And we're not going to do that. We're out here giving you the truth, which is why we have no money other than that which you, the listeners, send into us, for which we are very, very grateful. So the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. And again, the network thanks you. We are very, very grateful to those of you who have donated, to those of you who continue to donate, and basically keep Republic Broadcasting on the air, on the net. And we do appreciate it. We really do here. Okay, so somebody just sent me an email saying all Joe Biden needs to do is claim he's part Eskimo, and rubbing noses with women becomes polite. Maybe. Okay. Looking at the Boeing 737, it has now come on out that there have been incidents of the plane's nose dropping even here in the United States. And apparently the pilots were better trained. They were able to deal with it. But there is a problem with the aircraft. Boeing says they're working on a software patch. But I think the damage to Boeing's name has already been done here. And they're now confirming that the anti-stall system blamed for the Lion Air tragedy did activate just before the Ethiopia crash. So it's pretty obvious that's what's going on. The anti-stall system was getting erroneous information from the angle of attack sensor and basically usurped the pilot's authority over the aircraft and did a nose down, engines to full speed, which is what you would do if you were really in a stall condition, but the aircraft wasn't in a stall condition. And it's bad timing for Boeing, first of all, because the 737s are all still grounded. Airlines are canceling sales for that aircraft, and Boeing just came out with their latest aircraft, the 777X, and that probably is going to see some sales resistance because of this situation. And it's a reminder what happens when you start cutting corners to maximize your profitability, and you basically wreck the quality of the product. In the long run, you're going to pay for it. And I think Boeing has definitely seen a good example of that. Okay. Now, over in the European Parliament, they're backing a watershed resolution calling for repatriations, or rather reparations, for crimes committed in Africa during European colonialism. And the bill urges the European member states to introduce a series of sweeping reforms aimed at attacking the structural racism facing millions of Afro-Europeans. It calls on the countries to implement nationwide strategies to deal with discrimination in education, health, housing, policing, the justice system, and politics. Now, here's where I think we need to be looking at. There has been evil throughout history. But why force people who are not even alive back then to make amends to other people who are not alive back then? And we're seeing governments starting, they don't look forward anymore. They're looking back. Now, Mexico is now demanding an apology from Spain for their colonization, for the conquest of Mexico. And probably they're going to be demanding reparations. Spain has already told Mexico to go pound sand, that they're not going to do that. And it really is rather silly. It's like the reparations movement here in the United States, and the Democrats are campaigning on that, where they're going to take a lot of money from white people and give it to black people because of slavery, forgetting that none of the white people alive today were ever slave owners, and none of the black people alive today were ever slaves. We're going to take another break for commercials. We got callers waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones now, starting with John in Oregon. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. Do you have a pencil and paper right next to you?
I'm sure I can find one. What's on your mind?
Okay. Two Supreme Court rulings in 1919. Rushaber versus Union Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
And Stanton versus Baltic Mining.
I remember the Stanton versus Baltic Mining one.
Sure. Edward Douglas White was the Chief Justice, and he ruled in those two cases that the 16th Amendment describes an excise tax.
Yes.
And he said that the reason it describes an excise tax is because an amendment cannot conflict with the main body of the Constitution.
Yes.
Okay. So another one, Murdoch versus Pennsylvania, there the Supreme Court said that a government cannot charge for a federal constitutional right. That information is really powerful.
Yes, it is.
And I've used it. So that's about all I got to say right now.
Well, you know, of course, there's even a question whether the 16th Amendment was ever properly ratified or not. And there was an interesting case called Sullivan versus United States, where Sullivan basically charged that the war in Iraq was illegal because Congress had never declared war. And District Judge James C. Fox basically refuted that claim, saying that there were things that were done by the government that weren't exactly legal, but because they'd been gotten away with for so long, that they were just accepted. And the example he chose was the 16th Amendment. And he admitted in the court record that on examination, the 16th Amendment, on which the income tax is based, failed ratification. And if you go back and you look at Aaron Russo's video from Freedom to Fascism, basically the IRS refuses to try and validate that they have a lawful authority for collecting income tax. And basically they're saying that their response is, through their enforcement actions. In other words, they're just going to take what they want to take, and that's their response to claims that the income tax is illegal.
Yep. Yeah, and yet look around. You got all these H&R Blocks, Jackson Hewitt, and all these places saying, you got to file. So,
yep.
I don't know what they're basing that on. I've even gone in and asked them to see Title 26, and they don't know what it is.
Yep. Well, the people working at all these
amazing.
income tax preparation places, they're not constitutional lawyers. They get a job, they go through the training to basically apply the IRS code as it is in the current iteration to people's income. But whether or not it's all legal or not, they don't want to hear it, because their bowl of rice depends on it.
You're right. In Title 26, a taxpayer is defined as a person who is liable for the tax. You can go through the 9,000 pages and you'll never find that person.
Yep.
Which I thought was pretty interesting. So, yeah, we definitely live in the matrix.
Yep, we definitely do.
Yep. Well, thank you, Mike. That's
All right,
all I
thanks
needed
an
to
awful
say.
lot. We're going to let you go here. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Dan in Illinois. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
About Nebraska. I don't know if anybody's brought this up. A lot of that land is not going to be farmable because it's all covered with sand. There's videos out there with drones flying over these areas, and they're even saying that they will not be able to farm these lands because it's all sand.
Oh, my
a lot
goodness.
of what's washed down. I know what a lot of north Nebraska is volcanic dust from ancient times, and I imagine some of that washed down too. People got to think about farm equipment that got ruined.
Yes.
And they got to think about the bridges, big sections of bridges. They got videos of it. Big sections of bridges and roadbed have been washed away totally. So some of these farmers are actually isolated. Nobody can get to them. And there's supposedly like 20, 30 inches of snow still in Minnesota that need to be melted out. And nobody's even talking about California and the Sierras. There's tens of feet of snow up in those mountains that have not melted yet.
It's
well, that's
a
another
mess.
disaster, I think. It is. It's going to get even worse. So if you like hamburger, go out and buy some right now. I'll let you go. Hope you feel better.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And it is a mess. It is an epic fail of the government to deal with reality. They're so caught up in their fantasies of human-caused global warming and America's exceptionalism, and we've got to go to war, and we've got to give money to Israel. They dropped the ball on this one, and we're all going to be paying the price for it at the supermarket later this year. So, anyway. All right, we're still looking at this college entrance, college exam, college paper cheating scandal. It just seems to be growing and growing and growing. And a lot of parents are now very angry because obviously they're trying to get their kids into these prestige universities, Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, and they're going to get turned down. And they're going to say, did we get turned down because some wealthy parents bought their kid's way into the university ahead of my kid? And they should be angry. They should be very, very angry. Now, right now, 33 parents have been charged in the scandal. They're winding up in federal court in Boston for their first appearance related to the scandal. They should be able to avoid serving jail time if they plead guilty. But it's still a stink, and it destroys the reputation of the universities that were involved. It destroys the reputation of the university system as a whole because of all that's come on out. That there are people who basically will accept payment to get students into these prestige universities who don't deserve to be there. There are other people who, for money, will write the term papers or even take the entrance exams for these students, pretend to be them. It's all about the money. Now, there's a lady, Kimora Lee Simmons, and she's out there basically crowing that her daughter, Aoki, got into Harvard at the age of 16 on her own merit. And she's out there eviscerating Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman. As well she should. Universities are supposed to be based on merit, not on money, certainly not on political correctness. It's a big, big stink here. All right. Over at the Amherst College in Massachusetts, they've emailed students a 36-page common language guide. And it's not just a speech code. It tells students what words are supposed to mean and how you're supposed to think about them. For example, capitalism is described as an economic arrangement that leads to exploitative labor practices which affect marginalized groups disproportionately. In other words, it's thought control. That's what Amherst College is doing. They're indoctrinating their students towards socialism. And for this, those kids took out student loans. It's amazing here. Here's an interesting little article. This came out of Russia Today. It's talking about politically correct culture and how it is targeting art, literature, and theater. And basically just attacking classic writers, world-famous pieces of art, and saying that has to be taken down. This has to be taken down. This has to be removed from the curriculum because it could possibly be offensive to one group or another. And they make a comment here that I think goes right to the heart of the matter. It's almost like the West is in a fight against its own cultural history, and I think that's exactly what's going on. The politically correct movement is an attack on our cultural history to make us forget who we are, where we came from, as part of the New World Order, the globalism. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now. John in British Columbia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Have you heard of the Georgia Guidestone?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, well, because I was, with this weather thing, I was just trying to connect a few dots. On the Georgia Guidestone, it says they want to reduce the population of the world down to 500 million.
Yes.
And I seen a clip one time where Lyndon Baines Johnson said, "He who controls the weather controls the world." Now, if they got weather manipulation, they can get the El Niños to go north and turn it into snow. Like one of your previous callers says, up in Minnesota somewhere, there's still 30 inches of snow. Well, now that's melting. And a fella before him said about the flood control. They're not doing something right. Well, you do that, and now you've destroyed the land, or not destroyed it, but covered it so they can't plant food, which gives you a food shortage. Then you have starvation, and in the long run, you end up reducing the population of the world, and then it all gets blamed on nature, because that's what happened, right? You can't point too many fingers.
Well, I don't blame nature. I blame a government that ignored nature and ignored reality and allowed all of this stuff to happen.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. They'll blame it on the weather when it's actually them that are controlling the stuff in the long run. I mean, it's just connecting a few dots that that are there, and people just sort of don't look at it in the big picture.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, but efforts to modify the weather have not worked out very successfully in the past. And I think rather than ascribe, some kind of a nefarious motive to current events, I really do think it's a case of classic government ineptitude and incompetence, because they saw this stuff coming and they didn't do anything about it.
Well, that's true too. But even so, I mean, they don't worry about. I mean, they performed 9/11 when they killed over 3,000 people. They didn't worry about that. And this is just another way of doing something that gets more people or will kill more people. if that's their agenda. And I'm sure that is
The
in the
problem
long
with that
run.
agenda is that there will be food riots and rioting that could bring the government itself down. So I don't think it's something that they're intending that to happen. I think when the global government decides it's time to thin out the population, if they can't get it through a world war, they'll do it with a pandemic, like the Spanish flu immediately following World War I.
Yeah, and I think it was like 18 million people died in that.
Something like that.
Something to it. Way up there, yeah. Yeah, so you got to kind of wonder what with where their minds are at when they're doing this stuff. Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Terry in California. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I was wondering if you happen to know when one party gets on, a third party gets on the ballot and so many states, like in 2016, would they stay on the ballot for 2020? Or do you have to go through that whole thing again?
They have to go through that whole process again.
Oh, man. I thought my thought was if they stayed on there and they had so many states, and if there was another party that got in so many states, maybe the same candidate could run on two different tickets. One on so many states and a different party in some other states. But if they got to go through the whole thing again, well, do the Republicans and Democrats have to go through the whole thing again every time?
No, they don't. They have an automatic include onto all the states' presidential ballots. But for a third party, they have to run a petition drive in every single state just to get on the ballot.
Yeah, that's just the way they control things.
Yes.
It's all controlled by two parties, and if you can get control of both those parties, then you control the whole thing. You control everything.
Absolutely.
And so that's that's their game, and we got to think of some way to get around that. Rather than a change. You're talking about lawmakers, and you can't change the law if whatever happens, benefits the lawmakers. They're just going to maintain control. And,
you're absolutely right about that. But like I said, I am seeing that we're coming close to a collapse of the current system. And we, the American people, first of all, we have to be prepared to get through a period of hardship. And second, we just need to decide for ourselves what the next country is going to be like on this land. And, of course, my vote is the Constitution and the first 13 amendments. And all of the existing perpetual, permanent, professional politicians are banned from public office. Anyway, Terry, got to let you go.
There's the music, Mike. I'm going to let you go. Thank you for the call. Bye.
All right, thank you. We'll talk to you soon. Welcome back to our show. I'm sorry for the delay there. Over in the European Union, as you know, they've passed this new copyright law that basically kind of wrecks the internet as we've all known it, specifically Articles 13 and Article 11. And Article 13 basically outlaws the idea of memes. And people are saying it's going to create two internets. There's going to be the European internet, which is highly restrictive, and then there's going to be the rest of the world, which things are going to go along pretty much the way they have. But apparently, at least 13 members of the European Parliament have told the European Parliament they accidentally voted the wrong way. Now, apparently, the way the Parliament works on elections is they have a voting list. And MEPs just sort of go down the list pressing buttons according to the list handed out to them. And in a classic case of electronic voting having gone horribly wrong, apparently there was a vote inserted into the list at the last minute that threw most of the members of the European Parliament's voting lists out of sync. And The EU has modified their individual voting records, but refused to revisit the result of the vote, despite the fact there was a majority of just 5 members of the European Parliament who voted through this copyright issue. And the EU has also rejected a direct request from members of the European Parliament to stage the entire vote again. So it looks like it may not have actually passed, but certain vested interests want it to be the law of Europe, and so it shall be. Okay, over at Facebook, a lot of problems there. There's the class action complaint alleging lax security measures, increasing users' risk of identity theft, following the 2018 hack of 50 million user accounts. There's the Federal Trade Commission probe into Facebook's compliance with a 2011 consent agreement to safeguard users' personal information. And according to Fortune magazine, if the company is found to have violated the agreement, fines amounting to the hundreds of millions of dollars may be levied. And the House Judiciary Committee is also conducting an investigation looking for links between Cambridge Analytica, Russia, President Trump, and WikiLeaks. All right, we're going to take a break here for station identification, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about Facebook. And apparently there is yet another problem. The U.S. is charging Facebook with racial discrimination in targeted housing ads. And apparently Facebook has been accused of selling targeted advertising that discriminated on the basis of race in violation of the U.S. Fair Housing Act. And basically, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development said that Facebook also restricted who could see housing-related ads based on national origin, religion, familial status, sex, and disability. So Facebook's in a little bit of trouble. Okay, Google is being accused of profiting from anti-Semitic remarks and hate speech as people pay to have their extremist opinions shown prominently on YouTube in the latest scandal to rock the firm. And apparently YouTube has this situation where if you are willing to pay money, your video, regardless of its content, can be promoted prominently on the Super Chat feature. Now, the comments are meant to abide by the company's terms of service, which prohibits hate speech, but apparently it's not being enforced. An investigation into the feature saw a host of extremist and anti-Semitic remarks on content from right-wing vloggers and conspiracy theorists. Some called the horrific terrorist events in New Zealand an Israeli false flag operation. Others said Brexit required a violence-oriented solution. Comments can be promoted for a sum anywhere up to £500 in exchange for a certain period of time at the top of the comment ticker. The money goes to the producer of the video, but Google takes a 30% cut of the takings. It's all about the money. All about the money. Okay, there is a Chinese gaming company that has come out with a LGBTQ dating app called Grindr. And apparently the U.S. National Security Panel has declared the app to be a threat to military service personnel. So Beijing Kunlun Tech Company, which has owned the California-based dating app since 2016, has decided to sever ties at the behest of the Committee on Foreign Investments in the United States, which pointed to major concerns over personal data of app users, notably military and intelligence personnel, being made publicly available. Now, Grindr labels itself the largest social networking app for gay, bi, trans, and queer people, and it came under intense pressure last year when it was revealed the app was releasing the HIV status of users without their permission. Well, I'd say that's a tacky no-no. Absolutely. China has announced that it will ban all variants of fentanyl. And this is a move that could slow the supply of a drug that in recent years has caused tens of thousands of overdose deaths in the United States. This was apparently a promise that was made to Donald Trump. But by declaring that all varieties of fentanyl are now controlled substances, China made good on a pledge that the Chinese leader Xi Jinping made to President Trump late last year. China's export of the drug, which American officials say accounts for the vast majority of fentanyl that ends up in the United States, has long been a source of tension in relations. And, pardon me, it also became tangled up in the continuing trade war. Well, that would definitely be a good thing, but we still have all that opium coming in from Afghanistan, courtesy of the Central Intelligence Agency. Okay, apparently evolutionary roboticists are starting to teach artificial intelligence-powered robots to evolve and reproduce. So why should humans go to the trouble of building more robots when a robot can do it instead? Now, we all knew this was going to happen, robots building more robots. As far as the evolution of the artificial intelligence component, there is a bit of a problem there. We are already at a stage where humans don't really understand what's going on inside those machines. And if the artificial intelligence systems start to evolve and teach each other, that is going to get a lot worse. So, according to futurism, they're calling it high-tech Darwinism, and the researchers' goal is to design artificial intelligence and robots that can analyze their own source code and mate with others by combining bits and pieces of their code with that of other robots. Now, I think computers are cool. I've spent most of my life around computers. I think this is a very dangerous direction to be going. Again, because we won't know what's happening inside these AI systems. And what happens if an AI decides it doesn't like you? So you can see where I'm a little bit concerned here. Right now, we have computers that are basically in charge of the world's financial systems, and a lot of them are now AI as well. So there's a risk factor there as well. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Okay. A former contractor for the National Security Agency has pled guilty to charges that he stole and held on to classified government secrets. Harold Martin of Glen Burnie, Maryland, entered a guilty plea in a Baltimore federal courtroom. When he was arrested in 2016, investigators said thousands of secret and top secret documents in printed and digital form were found in his house and car. Now, his defense lawyers are saying that his actions were the product of mental illness, not treason. Going for an insanity defense. That is nasty, nasty stuff. When the NSA's own people can't be trusted to keep those secrets. Now, the question is, where did all that stuff go? Whose hands is it in? Now, if he was going to make it public, if he was a whistleblower, that would be one thing. But it looks to me like this guy was just stealing this stuff to sell it. Or maybe it was just the thrill of having it. Because apparently he still had a huge amount of it just in his home and car. Knowing that it's a felony to have that stuff, why would he keep it? It's a strange, strange story indeed. Okay. we've already had calls about this during our show about how these floods have decimated U.S. farms. Stockpiles are lost. Grain silos have collapsed or have been flooded. Many of these farm fields are not going to be plantable for months. And according to that caller, where some of these fields are now covered with sand, they may not be plantable at all for a long time. There are going to be food shortages in this country, so by all means, let's have millions more hungry mouths pour into the nation across that southern border just because they're going to vote Democratic. And it's amazing to look at the Democrats and the open border people, and they just don't get it. We're looking at major food shortages for the American people. There's not going to be enough food for us. And still they want to bring more and more people in across that border. There could be food riots all across this country. When you look at those illegal immigrants pouring across the border, those are the people that you will be fighting with at your local supermarket for an ear of corn. And I don't understand why our government is not dealing with that reality. Of course, our government doesn't deal with reality. They're living in fantasy land. They're living in fantasy land where we're going to win all these wars, that we can go on supporting Israel, that we can have all these immigrants come into the country without cost. Anybody looking at the massive amounts of snow that hit this last winter, had to know there were going to be massive, massive floods, and they did nothing about it. They did nothing about it. I'm getting emails from people saying that, you know, where they're living, there's still snow on the ground. This is April. So, okay. Over at Ford, there apparently is an issue with the Ford Explorer, where owners of the Ford Explorer have complained to Ford and federal regulators that they believe exhaust fumes are seeping into the interior, into the cabins of their vehicles. And, of course, it's making them ill. And a lot of drivers have complained to regulators the company's recommended fix didn't work. So Explorer owners have filed more than 50 legal claims nationwide against Ford, and some police departments in the U.S. said in 2017 that Explorers used as cruisers were exposing their officers to carbon monoxide. Okay. All right. We're going to take a phone call here. Loomer in Oregon. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. These farmers that are being flooded out in here, they're going to get a late planting, and it's going to lead to more. It's going to lead to more contamination of our food because they get planted so late. They're going to, like wheat and corn, the wheat and all those other grains. They'll spray it with Roundup herbicide in order to get their crop in before the season runs too late.
Yes.
And yep. And so I just figured I'd bring that up to you and all your listeners.
It's a mess. There's no question about it.
Yep, I'm come from a farming family myself, and I know how these guys behave. Yep, they don't care about contaminating our food supply just as long as they get their money. Yep. So,
well, I wouldn't, castigate the farmers. I mean, they're doing the best they can. They've been dealt, a cruel blow. First of all, by the hard winter, by the flooding, by the government's failure to deal with the flood control infrastructure, and they're really just doing the best that they can in a bad situation.
I don't deny they're in a bad situation, but that doesn't mean they have to contaminate the food supply. Also, they should probably just ride it out for the year and do the best they can. Yep.
Well, that would make the food shortages even worse.
Yep. So, all right, Michael, I'll let you. I'm gonna let you. We'll open up this line so if you have another caller. So you have a good day, and I hope you feel better.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here, and it is a problem that as the food shortages around the world worsen, that governments are going to be motivated to allow food companies to expand the use of fillers, non-food chemicals, to try and bulk up the food so you feel full even if you're not getting the nutrition. This is just a bad situation all the way around. Now, over in China, they've had a couple of really bad explosions. One was at a chemical plant. It killed 47, injured 640, and the executives at the chemical plant were arrested by the police. So the Chinese know how to deal with corporate malfeasance. When you have a disaster like that here in the U.S., the corporate executives never have to pay for it. They're protected by corporate law. Okay. All right, I'm going to have a little trouble pronouncing this. Mount Popocatépetl is a volcano, and apparently it is starting to erupt. They've issued a yellow alert warning. This is called the most dangerous volcano in North America, and it shot ash nearly a mile into the sky. And they're talking about a major evacuation around the area, which could include Mexico City, which is only 43 miles away. That's 25 million people living within a 60-mile radius of the crater. So Mother Nature's definitely on the rag, as it were. Getting on back to China, scientists in southwest China's Yunnan province have cloned what they call the Sherlock Holmes of police dogs in a program they hope will help cut training times and costs for police dogs. The dog was named Kungsung, was cloned from a police sniffer dog by the Beijing-based Synergene Biotechnology Company and the Yunnan Agricultural University with support from the Ministry of Public Security. Apparently this dog is very talented, and they decided we're just going to make more of them. So Synergene is hoping to make it possible to achieve volume production of cloned police dogs in order to reduce training times. Well, it sounds really kind of good thing to do. Over at Amazon, there's a big stink there where they have banned 4 Nation of Islam Black History books. And it's basically being denounced as one of the ways Jewish power is wielded in America. Now, Amazon provided no warning, no reason, no hearing, and no opportunity to respond. It was a blatant mockery of Amazon founder Jeff Bezos' own creed, democracy dies in darkness. It is, however, perfect proof of what Elijah Muhammad said, the mental resurrection of black people will anger our oppressors and cause them to react punitively and viciously. So Amazon has gone over to the dark side. Okay. Excuse me. Apparently they've had a... Hang on. Excuse me there. They had a major cyclone down in Australia's Northern Territory, Cyclone Trevor, and it resulted in major evacuations. More than 1,000 residents have been evacuated from Groot, Eatland, and Numbalwar, with another 1,000 people being moved out of Buralula, the MacArthur River zinc mine. Robinson River and other communities all along the Gulf of Carpinteria coast of Queensland. So Mother Nature's definitely on a rampage all around the world. Apparently, thousands are still trapped after Cyclone Idai. 900 rescued in Mozambique as floodwaters begin to recede. So they had a bad one there over the 3 African nations got devastated by the cyclone. And they're saying they're hoping they can rescue a lot more people if the rain will let up. Okay. Story coming out of an Investment Watch blog. Government warns of historic widespread flooding through May. Food prices to skyrocket as thousands of farms are destroyed. So it's another confirmation of what I've been saying. Okay, we got to take another break here for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still talking about the flooding in the Midwest here. And Nebraska alone is looking at 1.3 billion with a B in flood losses. And this is coming from the state's governor. At least 3 people have been killed in Nebraska and Iowa. And they're basically saying rapid snow melt and heavy rainfall have caused this catastrophic flooding across the Missouri River Basin, and 3/4 of Nebraska's 93 counties have declared an emergency, according to Governor Pete Ricketts. The cost of the damage has surpassed $1.3 billion. That includes $449 million in damage to roads, levees, and other infrastructure, $440 million in crop losses, and $400 million in cattle losses. So there are going to be food shortages. The price of beef is going to go through the roof. We need to shut that southern border right now, because all of these illegal immigrants are only going to make the food shortages that much worse. Why is that not making common sense? Okay, over in Rockland County, there was a big stink there where they were basically going to ban anybody who wasn't vaccinated from all public places because of this epidemic of measles cases. Well, somebody went back and actually looked at the numbers and discovered that they had hundreds of suspected measles cases, but only 5 actual cases. And they were just spinning it as hundreds to try and ramp up the hysteria, to get everybody to go on out and get the MMR vaccine. It's pushing product. It's pushing product here. Now, one of the issues that we do need to be looking at right now is that as our quality of life deteriorates, it opens up a window of opportunity for disease. And especially in the homeless encampments, where we're literally seeing a return to medieval living conditions and a return of medieval diseases. And some of these diseases that ravaged populations in the Middle Ages are resurging in California and around the country and hitting these homeless populations especially hard. So you can't look at those homeless encampments and say we have a healthy economy. You can't look at those homeless encampments and say we are a great nation. We're not. We are absolutely not. Anyway, apparently there's a new campaign out where people who are anti-vaccination, their neighbors get warning letters saying, beware of this person, they're opposed to vaccination. Shun them. It's the new shunning campaign. Don't go near this person. They're opposed to vaccines. They could be a danger to you. Well, not really. If you've gotten the vaccine, and assuming the vaccine works, then you should be perfectly safe, right? But you're constantly seeing all of this Sturm und Drang about how the unvaccinated pose a danger to everybody else. How can that be if the vaccines work? In fact, research is showing it's the vaccinated who are a danger to those around them because they're shedding the pathogen in their sweat, in their breath. And that's why we see so many times where they say, oh, there's this epidemic of measles or mumps, and it turns out that those people were all vaccinated. So, anyway, that's the new thing. Okay, over in Africa, the Ebola outbreak has spread to a new city, Bunia, and the patient is a 6-month-old baby who appears to be fighting the infection and is actually doing quite well. But they have confirmed it's an Ebola infection, and it's a serious, serious problem. Because somebody who is infected but not symptomatic could get on an airplane and be anywhere in the world in just 24 hours. And that's a serious, serious situation. It's the downside to the modern age of jet travel. Okay, we've got to take another commercial break here, and we've got a caller waiting on the line. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Alan in North Dakota. Aloha, Alan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. Listen, if these vaccine makers are so brilliant and creative as to make a vaccine that will prevent you from getting something, might one with equal logic assume that they could make one that will cure you immediately if you get the disease?
Well, the whole idea of a vaccine is that your body cures itself at the first moment of infection.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, I mean, I'm repeating myself. If they can make a vaccine to prevent you from getting something, why don't they make one that after you get the disease, it'll immediately cure you? Another kind of vaccine.
That's a very good question. But you know, curing people is not a sustainable business model for the medical industrial complex. And that came from no less than Goldman Sachs, who basically came on out and said that selling vaccines, selling treatments, that's the way to profitability, and actually curing people doesn't make economic sense because then they just go away and the cash flow stops.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a logical argument shown in their face.
Yep.
Anyway, thank you, Michael.
Okay, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to switch over to Philip in Virginia. Aloha, Philip. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Rockland County, New York is on my mind. You added some new information about that situation up there. I think it was a beta test all along, but you just reported that they only had like 5 cases. They admit that there was only 5 cases. RBN had an article up on their homepage the other day, and there was a phone call that a woman made to the Rockland County Health Department, and which they admitted, the woman who answered the phone admitted there was only 5, but I didn't realize the details that you described, that somebody did a little digging, and it was kind of like the flu. You know how they say, oh, so many thousand died from the flu? Well, when they look at it forensically, no, these people don't have the flu. They're dying from something else. Same thing with this measles thing. That, oh, well, like you just reported, it was measles-like symptoms, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, this is an outrage. They are perpetrating a fraud in order to, accomplish what? That they can see how the public are going to respond to a medical martial law type situation, or like you said, the science is subordinated to the big pharma's profits. We got to get as many people to get these MMR shots. I mean, this isn't a damned outrage, and I don't think they're going to be satisfied, Michael, until they finally come up with the scenario where they alter the DNA in such a way that it turns people into animals. What was that movie? The original, I think, was Charlton Heston, but the most recent one was Will Smith, I Am Legend.
Yes.
You remember that?
Yep.
Yeah. What was that? The original name of that movie?
I forget the Charlton Heston version, but basically it was somebody had made a goof with a medication that everybody had taken and transformed them into something a little less than human. And that's always the concern because the vaccine makers are indemnified from civil liability for their creations, which means they can put whatever they want in there. There's still a concern over the fact that negalase, which blocks the body's ability to fight cancer naturally, is in human vaccines, and there doesn't seem to be any medical necessity for it to be there. Plus the fact that more people have died from the measles vaccine than from measles itself. It's all about the money. It's about forcing you to buy products you don't want and don't really need.
It's all about the Benjamins.
Yep.
Oh, man, I tell you. Well, the pursuit of or the love of money, as the scripture says, is the root of all kinds of evil. But anyway, and I appreciate your, a couple of weeks ago, you were reporting about, I think it was someone had won an award, a Nobel Prize or something, and then they took it away because they didn't like what he said. I think it was about global warming or something. Well, anyway, you made a statement about that's what takes place when science is subordinated to corporate profits.
Yes.
That phrase, the way you put that, applies to so much in our society, in our culture. It's outrageous. So, but I appreciate your update on the travesty and the outrage there in Rockland County. And I watched the press conference that they had, and I wanted to know who that health director was that come up with the bright idea. Oh, she was conveniently out of town. So she had some deputies there, and the county lawyer was there.
Whoops. Looks like we just lost somebody. Yeah, and again, if the vaccines work, then the unvaccinated are not a threat. They're not a health danger. But that's the message going out through the media to get you to stampede down to your local doctor, your local pharmacy, and get stuck with a needle. And I mean, down here at the local Longs, they have, you'll actually get a discount on your purchase if you get the flu shot. I mean, that's how they're pushing this stuff. Somebody just wrote on in to say that Charlton Heston's version of the movie was the Omega Man. Yeah, that was, I remember that one. Okay. And I want to say thanks to everybody who's writing in all these emails about my health and how terrible I look. And, well, I look like this all the time. But as soon as the show is over, I've got a couple of errands I have to run, and then I'm going back to bed, and hopefully I'll be better for the show tomorrow. Anyway, let's go back to the phones here. Chris in Clearwater, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
same as the last caller, that the Rockland County, New York, county executive Ed Day, who made the announcement of the county emergency, and the last caller mentioned the lady who called in and found out that there were 5 cases, as you mentioned. Well, possibly the official said there are possibly 5 cases. So does that mean there are possibly 4, possibly 3, 2, 1? You know, of active cases, there are 157 since last October, but active cases there are possibly 5. And according to this, a quick excerpt from an article in the Rockland Westchester Journal News dated March 29th, quote, the number of measles cases since October is up to 157. Rupert said today, though there are fewer than 10 active cases, end quote. They don't give an exact number. So, you know, there's obviously not an emergence, no cause for alarm. And, you know, Ed Day also, in his emergency announced that, in his announcement of the emergency, said that you have to be vaccinated in order to be in public. Folks have to be vaccinated with Merck's MMR2 vaccine. So, Michael, as you mentioned, that is brand promotion.
Yes.
And hopefully it'll backfire on us with publicity that we're giving it here. So, you know, he also stated, Ed Day also stated that medical exemptions are permissible. If you have a medical exemption, then does that mean it's perfectly safe to be in public? You're unvaccinated, but you have a medical exemption. I guess that means you're safe.
Well, if the vaccine really works, then you're safe to be in public anyway because everybody around you's been vaccinated. That's the contradiction, which shows that this is nothing more than propaganda and a marketing campaign. And I think this was a test balloon, if you will, a trial balloon, if you will, of the idea of ostracizing the unvaccinated and saying you can't go out in public. And basically means people are going to have to walk around, you know, with their vaccine records in their wallet, you know, to say, see, I'm vaccinated, I've got the vaccination.
Well, our Fifth Amendment protected right against self-incrimination and HIPAA allow us to remain silent when asked for our health data. Well, how about those who are vaccinated with blood titer test results showing or no antibody levels? How? Because not everybody has a good immune response. You know, that's assuming the vaccine works. But how about those who are non-vaccinated with blood titer test results showing good antibody levels? You know, how about those who may have taken a homeopathic nosodes, that's spelled Nosodes? You know, why can't safe homeopathic nosodes, which are available for evoking antibodies for even more pathogens than our vaccines, and the resulting high antibody blood titer tests be accepted in lieu of risky, often deadly vaccines? All these questions we need to be putting forth here out in the public. And, you know, there's no mention with the state of emergency, there's no mention of quarantine, so wouldn't up to 6 months in jail put not only those convicted at risk, but also other inmates too?
Well, again, the whole point of this is to stampede everybody to buy the Merck MMR2 vaccine and enrich Merck and enrich their stockholders. And again, if you think about it, none of it really makes any sense, because if the vaccine works, then the unvaccinated do not represent a threat to the general vaccinated population.
Right. Well, they talk about herd immunity. They want to protect those who say have a medical exemption. It's not safe for them to be vaccinated. Well, they can take homeopathic nosodes. I don't know of any risks to nosodes, and still get. I've known lots of people who, and I see it online all the time, people who show, hey, look, I had a great antibody response, a good blood titer response. You know, you might not even have antibodies, And if you have a good immune response, you might develop antibodies and not even become symptomatic or have very mild symptoms because you have a good antibody, you have a good immune response. Or say you have high levels of selenium or zinc or silver, ionic silver, also known as silver hydrosol, is good for preventing viral replication. So you might not have the antibodies and yet have a very inhospitable biological terrain in your body if you're replete with such nutrients, and you can defeat pathogens very easily. Of course, when you're better nourished, you're probably more likely to have a better antibody response anyhow. But, it's not necessary to have antibodies, or if you do have antibodies, you might not be able, if you say you have a good antibody level, you might not have a good antibody response, a good antibody production at the time of infection. So antibodies are not the be-all, end-all of defeating germs. And, that comes out in the CDC's own, on their own website, in their, let's see, it's the CDC Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, June 22nd, 1984. And it says, just a quick excerpt, says, this outbreak, the measles outbreak they're referring to, this outbreak demonstrates that transmission of measles can occur within a school population with a documented immunization rate level of 100%. This level was validated during the outbreak investigation, end quote. And from, let's see, in the National Institutes of Health, they have a study entitled Major Measles Epidemic in the region of Quebec despite a 99% vaccine coverage. So you can have outbreaks where there's documented 99 or 100% vaccination rate, which surpasses so-called herd immunity, which is a whole other story as to whether that's a fallacy. But, let's just assume that their definition holds water of herd immunity and still have a major outbreak. And of course, obviously, when you have these outbreaks, many times, whether it's measles or other germs, then they are the strain that's found from the vaccine. So one would assume it's the vaccines that are spreading the germs.
Yeah, that's a common feature that we've seen lately, is every time there's another one of these measles or mumps outbreaks, we then find out that all the people who've come down with measles or mumps had the measles or mumps vaccine. And so you have to ask the question, is the vaccine itself actually causing the disease? And again, it has to do with the use of these weakened pathogen vaccines, which can, under certain circumstances, revert to full potency once they're administered. And it's a very reckless application of science, but again, the vaccine companies are indemnified against civil litigation, so they can just do whatever they feel that they want to do without fear of repercussions. Anyway, listen, Chris, I got to let you go. Got to do a commercial break. We got another caller on the line after we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And this is our last segment of our program today. And coming up, of course, is John Stadmiller's program, which is going to be a repeat, but it is the repeat of the special guest, Dr. Jane Orient, about vaccines. And obviously, with everybody calling and expressing their concerns about it, this is probably a program that you're going to want to pay attention to, because she destroys a lot of the myths surrounding vaccines. All right, let's go back to the phones here to James in Ohio. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'm sorry you're feeling ill. May I ask, is it a respiratory problem like cold or flu?
No, it's just kind of a bug that I picked up. I think I picked it up from Claire's church, and nothing that sleep won't fix.
Yeah, okay, good. I can kind of relate. I was working on a bathroom earlier, and we had to cut out part of the floor. and I managed to back up and fall through the floor. So I kind of feeling a little beat up myself. But anyway, there's very little as far as bugs or anything else that Good and Nice and Flush failed to help me with. You know, if you don't take niacin regularly, I'd say 300 milligrams probably fix you right up or cut your recovery time in half.
Well, Claire's the master of the vitamins in this house. She's got a whole cupboard full of them. And, you know, she's giving me pills, and I just obediently swallow them.
Right. And now that I'm back to work after my boss taking 4 months off, I'll be able to get that stuff I promised to you.
Okay.
Soon, you know, probably next week. All right. Keep up the good work, and everybody donate to Mike Rivero and What Really Happened, Republic Broadcasting.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the kind words and for the kind solicitation. We're going to let you go. Feel better. I'm glad you're getting back to work. And I know what that feels like. I remember when I went through my pneumonia a few years back, which just knocked me on my rear end for 10 days. And then for like the first week I was back on the radio, I had that oxygen thing on my nose. That was embarrassing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Apparently, chronic wasting disease is back. This is, well, they used to call it mad cow disease. It's now called zombie deer disease, and it's hitting deer, elk, and moose populations across the United States. There is a concern it could actually transmit to humans. And like mad cow disease, chronic wasting disease attacks the brain and spinal cord and is believed to be caused by prions, which are infectious proteins that travel in bodily fluids and remain contagious for years after leaving the body of their host. They're just snippets of DNA. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. And again, thanks for everybody who's donated to Republic Broadcasting and whatreallyhappened.com. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go back to bed is what I'm going to do. So we'll talk to you tomorrow. Aloha, America.